Commander Nari stood at the edge of the observation deck on Space Station Omega-7. Her hands gripped the cold metal railing as she stared into the endless darkness of space. Stars twinkled in the distance like tiny diamonds scattered across. Black silk, but Nari saw no beauty in them anymore. She saw only the void that matched the emptiness in her heart. Behind her, the space station hummed with activity. Repair crews worked on damaged ships. Medical teams rushed wounded soldiers to the hospital bay. Communications officers sent messages across the galaxy. But Neri heard none of it. The sounds seemed to come from another world, a world where she still belonged. Her ship, the Crimson Dawn, floated near the station like a broken toy. Hull plates were missing. Weapon ports gaped open like wounds. The bridge where she had commanded. Her crew for 3 years was gone, blown away by Vexstar plasma cannons. 24 hours ago, it had been one of the finest ships in the Galactic Defense Fleet. Now it was scrap metal. Nari closed her eyes and saw the battle again. The Crimson Dawn had dropped out of hyperspace near the Kepler system on what should have been a simple mission. Intelligence had said the area was clear. They were wrong. A Vexstar dreadnought had been waiting for them like a spider in its web. The enemy ship was 3 times larger than the Crimson Dawn. Its black hull was covered in spikes and weapon ports. When it opened fire, green plasma bolts lit up space. Like deadly lightning. Nari had ordered evasive maneuvers, but there was nowhere to run. The dreadnought had brought escort ships. They were surrounded. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. It felt like 20 years. Nari watched her crew die one by one. Lieutenant Heijin, her best friend since academy days, was killed when the bridge took a direct hit. Engineering Chief Wu Jin died trying to restore power to the shields. 47 good people lost their lives because of her orders. Nari should have seen the trap. She should have been more careful. She should have listened when Heijin suggested they wait for backup, but she had been eager to prove herself, to show the High Council that her ship could handle any mission. Her pride had killed her crew. Only 12 people survived. They were rescued when Alliance reinforcements finally arrived, too late to save the Crimson Dawn. Nari had been unconscious when they pulled her from the wreckage. She wished they had left her there to die with her ship. The war against the Vexstar had been going badly for 2 years. The insect-like aliens seemed to enjoy causing pain and destruction. They had conquered 12 star systems already. Their ships were faster and stronger than anything the Alliance could build. Their soldiers felt no fear and showed no mercy. Every Alliance species had tried to stop them. The proud Altarians with their massive battle cruisers, the clever Xenorians with their advanced technology, the fierce Draknari with their warrior culture. All had failed. The Vexstar kept coming, system after system, world after world. Nari had joined the war believing she could make a difference. She was young then, full of hope and determination. She thought courage and skill would be enough. How foolish she had been. The universe did not care about courage. It only cared about strength. And the Vexstar were stronger. She opened her eyes and looked down at the deck plating beneath her feet. It would be so easy to climb over the railing. The observation deck had no artificial gravity field at the edge. One step and she would float into space. Her suit had enough air for maybe 10 minutes. It would be peaceful. No more guilt. No more shame. No more watching good people die because of her mistakes. Nari lifted 1 foot toward the railing. The metal felt cold against her boot. Just 1 more step and it would all be over. She would join Heijin and the others. They were probably waiting for her somewhere in the darkness between the stars. A voice spoke behind her. Rough day? Nari turned around, surprised. She had thought she was alone. A man stood near the entrance to the observation deck. He was tall and lean, wearing the blue uniform of the Terran Expeditionary Force. His hair was black and his skin was the warm brown color common among humans. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were dark and kind with small lines around them that suggested he smiled often. Nari had heard of humans but had never met one. They were the newest species to join the Galactic Alliance, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most Alliance members considered them primitive and weak. Their technology was inferior. Their ships were small. Their military was tiny compared to the great fleets of older civilizations. The human walked closer, his hands clasped behind his back. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. There was something different about him, something that set him apart from other Alliance officers she had known. He seemed relaxed, despite being on a military station in the middle of a war zone. "I am Captain Donghyun Park," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. His voice was calm and steady. "You are Commander Nari of the Crimson Dawn, are you not?" Nari nodded but did not speak. She wondered how he knew her name. Human ships rarely came to the front lines. They were usually assigned to escort duty or supply runs, far from the real fighting. Captain Donghyun looked out at the stars for a moment, then back at her. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. It was not a cruel smile or a mocking one. It was the kind of smile shared between people who understood suffering. "I heard about your ship," he said quietly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Losing crew members is never easy. Nari felt anger flare in her chest. What could this human possibly know about loss? His people had been fighting for 50 years, not 50 centuries. They had never faced an enemy like the Vexstar. They played at being soldiers while real warriors died. "You know nothing about it," she said, her voice sharp with pain and fury. "Your kind hides behind the real fighters. You escort supply ships while we die on the front lines." Captain Donghyun nodded as if he expected her anger. "You are right," he said. "We are new to this war. We have much to learn." His calm acceptance of her insult surprised Nari. She had expected him to defend his people or walk away offended. Instead, he remained where he was, waiting patiently for her to continue. Nari turned back toward the stars. 47 people died because I made a mistake," she said. "Good people who trusted me to bring them home safely. I failed them all." "Did you make the mistake on purpose?" Captain Donghyun asked. The question caught Nari off guard. "Of course not." "Then you did not fail them," he said simply. "You made a decision with the information you had. Sometimes good people die despite our best efforts. That is the nature of war." Nari looked at him with new interest. There was something in his voice, a depth of understanding that suggested he spoke from experience. Maybe humans knew more about loss than she had assumed. "What do you want?" "She asked. Captain Donghyun smiled again, and this time there was something different in his expression. Something that looked almost like hope. "I want to talk," he said. "About the war, about the Vexstar, about what comes next?" Nari almost laughed. What could possibly come next? The Alliance was losing. Every battle cost them ships and crews they could not replace. The Vexstar grew stronger with each victory. Soon they would break through the defensive lines and reach the core worlds. Billions would die, but something in the human's eyes made her hesitate. He looked at her as if he saw something she had forgotten, as if he believed she still had value, still had purpose. When was the last time someone had looked at her that way? Captain Donghyun extended his hand toward her. "Walk with me, Commander. Let me show you something." Nari stared at his outstretched hand. She could still step over the railing. She could still join her crew in the peaceful darkness. But curiosity held her back. What could this human possibly show her that would matter? Against her better judgment, Nari reached out and took his hand. His grip was warm and steady, like his voice. He helped her step away from the railing and back onto the safe deck plating. "Where are we going?" she asked. Captain Donghyun's grin widened, and for the first time in days, Nari felt something other than despair. It was small and fragile, but it was there. A tiny spark of something that might have been hope. "To meet my crew," he said. "I think you will find them interesting." Captain Donghyun led Commander Nari through the winding corridors of Space Station Omega 7. The walls were made of gray metal panels that hummed softly with power. Emergency lights cast long shadows as they walked. Nari noticed that Dong Haiyan moved differently than other Alliance officers. He did not march with rigid military precision. Instead, he walked with the easy stride of someone who felt at home wherever he went. They passed other species in the hallway. Tall blue Altarians with their proud bearing. Small green Xenorians with their large eyes. Fierce red Drachnari with their scaled skin. All of them looked tired and defeated. The war was wearing everyone down. "Tell me about your people," Nari said as they walked. She was curious despite herself. Humans were still a mystery to most of the galaxy. Dong Haiyan smiled. "We are young compared to your civilizations. When the Alliance found Earth 50 years ago, we had just learned to travel between stars. Your people had been exploring space for thousands of years. We were like children playing with toys." Nari remembered the first reports about humanity. The Alliance scout ships had expected to find another primitive world that needed protection. Instead, they found something unexpected. Earth was a dangerous planet. Its gravity was stronger than most worlds. Its weather was violent and unpredictable. Massive storms could destroy entire cities. Earthquakes could split continents. Ice ages could freeze whole oceans, yet humans had not only survived, but thrived. They had learned to work together despite their differences. They had built great cities and beautiful art. They had reached for the stars even when it seemed impossible. "The High Council was surprised by us," Dong Haiyan continued. "Most species develop space travel slowly over millions of years. They build careful, safe technologies. They expand gradually from system to system. We did it all in a few thousand years. We were in a hurry. Why the rush?" Nari asked. Dong Haiyan stopped walking and looked at her. His expression grew serious. "Because we learned early that the universe is dangerous. On Earth, if you do not adapt quickly, you die. Predators hunt you. Diseases kill you. Natural disasters destroy everything you build. We learn to be tough or we learn to be dead." They continued walking until they reached the docking bay where human ships were moored. Nari expected to see the small, simple vessels she had heard about in briefings. Instead, she saw something that made her pause. The human ships were indeed smaller than Alliance cruisers, but they were built differently. Where Alliance ships were smooth and elegant, human ships looked rough and practical. Their hulls were covered with extra armor plates. Additional weapon mounts had been welded wherever they would fit. Engine exhausts glowed with barely contained power. "Your ships look like they were built for war," Nari observed. "All human ships are built for war," Dong Haiyan replied. "On Earth we have a saying, hope for peace but prepare for war. We learned that lesson the hard way." They boarded Dong Haiyan's ship, the Indomitable Spirit. The interior was cramped but efficient. Every space was used for something important. The walls were covered with handholds and emergency equipment. Nari noticed that everything was built to be repaired quickly in the field. "Captain on deck," called a woman's voice as they entered the bridge. Nari saw a young human female in a tactical officer's uniform. She had short black hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Commander Nari, meet Lieutenant So Young Kim, my tactical officer," Dong Haiyan said. "So Young, this is the commander of the Crimson Dawn." So Young stood and bowed respectfully. "I am honored to meet you, Commander. I have studied your battle records. Your tactics at the Proxima engagement were brilliant." Nari felt surprised. A human had studied her battles? "Thank you, Lieutenant. But my latest battle was not so brilliant." "No battle plan survives contact with the enemy," So Young replied. "That is another human saying. What matters is how you adapt when things go wrong." Two more crew members entered the bridge. The first was a stocky man with grease-stained hands and a friendly smile. The second was a small woman carrying a medical kit. "Sergeant Taeho Lee, our engineer," Dong Haiyan said, indicating the man, "and Corporal Ji-woo Choi, our medic." Both humans bowed to Nari. She noticed something strange about their behavior. They showed her respect, but they also seemed comfortable around their captain. In the Alliance military, lower ranks rarely spoke unless ordered to do so. But these humans acted like they were all part of the same family. Commander Nari has questions about our war preparations, Dong Hyan told his crew. Show her what we have been working on. So Young activated a holographic display in the center of the bridge. Three-dimensional images of Vexstar ships appeared in the air. Red lines showed their typical attack patterns. Blue lines showed their weaknesses. We have been studying the enemy for 2 years, So Young explained. Every battle, every engagement, every tactical decision. We have learned things about the Vexstar that other species have missed. Nari leaned forward to examine the display. What kind of things? Tejo stepped forward. They are strong but not flexible. They use the same attack patterns every time. They rely on overwhelming firepower instead of clever tactics. Like a hammer trying to solve every problem, Derwu added. Very effective against a nail, but useless against water. Nari studied the data with growing interest. The humans had identified patterns that Alliance strategists had missed. They had found weaknesses in Vexstar formations. They had developed countermeasures for Vexstar weapons. Why has nobody else seen this? She asked. Dong Hyan sat down in his captain's chair. Because other species fight the way they have always fought. They use traditional tactics and traditional thinking. But humans learned warfare on a world where traditional thinking gets you killed. So Young manipulated the display to show human battle formations. Instead of the neat lines and careful positioning favored by Alliance fleets, human ships moved in complex, seemingly chaotic patterns. We call it swarm tactics, she explained. Many small units working together to overwhelm a larger opponent? Like a school of fish attacking a shark. Nari had never seen anything like it. Alliance doctrine emphasized large ships with heavy armor and powerful weapons. Human doctrine emphasized speed, coordination, and unpredictability. Does it work? She asked. We have not had a chance to test it against the Vexstar, Dong Hyan admitted. The High Council keeps us away from the front lines. They think we are too inexperienced to face the enemy. Nari understood their frustration. She had felt the same way when she was young and eager to prove herself. But she also understood the High Council's caution. The war was going badly. They could not afford to lose ships on untested tactics. What would you need to prove your methods? She asked. The human crew exchanged glances. There was something in their expressions that Nari recognized. It was the look of people who had been waiting for someone to ask the right question. We would need a chance to fight, Dong Hyan said simply. A real battle against real Vexstar ships? And we would need someone the High Council trusts to vouch for us. So Young added. Nari realized they were asking her to help them, these humans. Wanted her to use her reputation and connections to get them into combat. It seemed like madness. She had just lost her own ship and crew. Why would she risk more lives on unproven tactics? But as she looked at their faces, she saw something that had been missing from Alliance meetings for months. She saw hope. These humans believed they could win. After 2 years of defeats and retreats, someone still believed victory was possible. The High Council will never approve it, she said. Dong Hyan's grin returned. Then we will have to find another way. Nari felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen that expression before in the mirror back when she was young and reckless. Back when she believed that rules were made to be broken and that boldness could overcome any obstacle. What are you suggesting? She asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. There is a Vexstar supply convoy moving through the Kepler system in 3 days, Tejo said. Intelligence says it is lightly defended. Just a few escort ships. We could intercept it, Jiwoo added. Test our tactics in a real engagement. Without orders, So Young finished. Without permission, without backup. Nari stared at them in amazement. They were proposing to disobey direct orders and attack the enemy without authorization. It was exactly the kind of reckless behavior that had gotten her crew killed. It was exactly the kind of thinking that the Alliance military tried to discourage. It was also exactly what the war needed. You are all insane, she said. Dong Hyen stood up and walked over to her. His expression was serious now, but his eyes still held that spark of determination. Commander Nari, he said quietly, yesterday. You were ready to give up. You were ready to let the darkness win. But you are still here. You are still fighting. That tells me something important about who you are. What does it tell you? It tells me that you are not ready to surrender. It tells me that somewhere inside, you still believe we can win this war. Nar looked around the bridge at the human crew. They were young and inexperienced. Their ship was small and their weapons were limited. By all logic, they should have no chance against the Vexstar, but they had something the Alliance had lost. The meeting took place in a forgotten storage bay deep in the lower levels of space. Station Omega 7. Nari had chosen the location carefully. No security cameras watched this area. No official records would show who had gathered here. If their plan failed, there would be no evidence to connect the station commander to their mutiny. Nari arrived first, followed by the survivors from her crew. Lieutenant Bioram looked nervous but determined. The young strategic officer had barely escaped the destruction of the Crimson Dawn, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Chief Petty Officer Kyung-soo walked with a slight limp from his injuries, but his eyes burned with the desire for revenge against the Vexstar. Captain Dong Hyen and his crew entered quietly. The humans moved with the careful precision of people who had done dangerous things before. Nari noticed that they had changed from their dress uniforms into combat gear. They were taking this seriously. Before we begin, Nari said, I want everyone to understand what we are discussing. This is not a sanctioned military operation. We have no orders, we have no backup. If we are captured or killed, the Alliance will deny all knowledge of our actions. Bioram shifted uncomfortably. Commander, perhaps we should reconsider. The regulations clearly state that unauthorized military action is punishable by court-martial and imprisonment. Nari looked at her young officer with understanding. Bioram had followed every rule, every protocol, every procedure throughout her career. The idea of breaking regulations went against everything she had been taught. You are right, Lieutenant, Nari said gently. This goes against everything we have learned about proper military conduct. Anyone who wants to leave may do so now with no shame and no consequences. Nobody moved. Even Bioram, despite her nervousness, remained in place. Dong Hyen stepped forward and activated a portable holographic projector. The image of the Kepler system appeared in the air between them. Red dots marked Vexstar positions. Blue lines showed shipping lanes and patrol routes. The convoy will pass through this area in 18 hours, he explained. 3 cargo ships carrying refined metals and energy cells, 2 escort cruisers for protection. Standard Vexstar formation? So Young manipulated the display to show the enemy ships in detail. The escorts are Stalker-class cruisers, fast but lightly armored. They carry plasma cannons and missile launchers. Dangerous but not invincible. Nari studied the tactical situation. What forces do we have? My ship, the Indomitable Spirit, Dong Hyen replied, plus 2 other human vessels that have volunteered to join us, the Resilient Hope and the Defiant Star. All 3 are modified for extended combat operations. That is only 3 ships against 5 Vexstar vessels, Kyung-soo observed. The odds are not favorable, Taeho grinned. Humans like bad odds, makes victory more satisfying. Nari found herself almost smiling at the engineer's confidence. What about my people? We have no ship. We have prepared for that, Juwoo said. She gestured to Dong Hyen, who nodded. Each human ship has been modified to carry additional crew members, the captain explained. Your people can serve as gunners, tactical advisors, and damage control specialists. We work better together than apart. Nari felt a moment of doubt. Alliance and human technology were different. Their procedures and protocols had been developed separately. Mixing crews from different species was unusual and potentially dangerous, but as she looked at the tactical display, she began to see the wisdom in Dong Hyen's plan. The humans understood Vexstar weaknesses, but they lacked experience in large-scale combat. Her people had that experience, even if their recent battle had ended badly. "Show me your attack strategy," she said. So Young changed the display to show the planned assault. Instead of the traditional alliance approach of frontal attack with heavy ships, the humans proposed something completely different. "We call it the Wolfpack strategy," she explained. "The three ships approach from different directions. We attack simultaneously but independently, forcing the enemy to divide their attention and firepower." Bioram leaned forward to study the formation. "The Vexstar will concentrate their forces and try to destroy you one ship at a time. That is their standard response to multiple attackers." "That is what we want them to do," Donghyan said. "While they focus on one target, the other two ships can attack their weak points. Vexstar ships are heavily armored in front but vulnerable from behind and below." Nari began to understand. Traditional alliance tactics relied on overwhelming firepower and heavy armor. If your ship was strong enough and your weapons were powerful enough, you could simply smash through enemy defenses. But human tactics relied on speed, coordination, and the enemy's own reactions. "It is like a dance," she murmured. "Exactly," So Young said with excitement. "Each move leads to the next. The enemy thinks they are responding to our attacks, but they are actually following our choreography." Kyung-soo looked skeptical. "What? If the Vexstar do not react as expected? What if they change their tactics?" "Then we adapt," Taeho said simply. "Human crews train for improvisation. When the plan breaks down, we make a new plan." Nari had seen Alliance crews struggle when their battle plans failed. Most species preferred detailed preparation and careful execution. When circumstances changed, they often became confused and ineffective. But these humans seemed to treat uncertainty as just another tactical challenge. "Walk me through the entire operation," she said. For the next 2 hours, they discussed every aspect of the mission. Approach routes, communication protocols, target priorities, escape plans. The humans had thought of everything. But they listened carefully to suggestions from Nari's crew. Ram pointed out weaknesses in their sensor positioning. Kyung-soo identified problems with their damage control procedures. Nari herself suggested modifications to their attack patterns based on her experience. Fighting Vexstar ships. What impressed Nari most was how the humans responded to criticism. In alliance meetings, questioning a superior's plan was often seen as insubordination. But Donghyan and his crew welcomed challenges to their ideas. They treated every suggestion as valuable input rather than an attack on their authority. "Why do you fight this way?" Nari asked during a brief break. "Most species prefer clear hierarchy and rigid command structure." Donghyan thought for a moment before answering. "On Earth, we learned that survival requires cooperation. A human alone is weak and slow, easy prey for stronger predators. But humans working together can accomplish amazing things. We have a saying," Wu added, "many hands make light work. When everyone contributes their skills and knowledge, the whole group becomes stronger." Nari contrasted this with Alliance military culture. Each species fought according to their own traditions and instincts. The Altarians relied on individual honor and personal courage. The Xenorians used superior technology and careful planning. The Drachnari followed strong leaders without question, but humans seemed to combine the best elements of all these approaches. They were brave like the Altarians, clever like the Xenorians, and disciplined like the Drachnari. Yet they added something uniquely human, the ability to trust each other completely. "There is something I do not understand," Boram said hesitantly. "Why are you willing to risk your lives for people you barely know? We are not even the same species." The question hung in the air for a long moment. Nari realized she had been wondering the same thing. These humans owed nothing to the Alliance. Their world was far from the front lines. They could sit out the war in safety if they chose. Donghyan looked at each of his crew members, then back at Beoram. "Because it is the right thing to do. The Vexstar want to destroy everything that is good and beautiful in the galaxy. If we do not stop them, who will?" "But you could die," Kyung-soo pointed out. "All of you could die." "Yes," So Young said quietly. "We could die." But if we do nothing, we will die anyway. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but eventually the Vexstar will come for Earth too. Better to die fighting than to die waiting. Nari felt something stir in her chest. It was a feeling she had not experienced since the destruction of her ship. It was hope. These humans were not fighting for glory or advancement or revenge. They were fighting because they believed that some things were worth dying for. When do we leave? She asked. In 6 hours, Dong Hyen replied. That will put us in position to intercept the convoy at optimal range. Nari looked around at the mixed group of humans and Alliance personnel. They came from different worlds, different cultures, different species. Under normal circumstances, they would have little in common. But war had brought them together, and perhaps war would make them stronger. I have one condition, she said. If we survive this mission, if we prove that mixed crews can work effectively, I want to propose a new type of unit to the High Council. Human ships with Alliance crews. Alliance ships with human advisors. We learn from each other. Dong Hyen extended his hand toward her. Agreed, Commander. We are stronger together than apart. Nari shook his hand firmly. Then let us go show the Vexstar what cooperation looks like. As they prepared to leave the storage bay, Nari felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders again. But this time it felt different. She was not carrying the burden alone. These humans had chosen to share it with her. Nari stood on the bridge of the indomitable spirit as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. The transition from faster-than-light travel to normal space always made her stomach lurch, but she forced herself to remain steady. Her new crew was watching her, and she needed to project confidence. The bridge was cramped compared to Alliance ships. Every surface served multiple purposes. The walls held emergency equipment, backup controls, and damage repair tools. There was no wasted space, no decoration, no comfort that did not serve a practical function. Sensors show 5 contacts bearing 27 Mark IV, So Young reported from her tactical station. Configuration matches expected Vexstar convoy formation. Nari moved to stand beside Captain Dong Hyen at the center of the bridge. Through the view screen she could see the enemy ships in the distance. 3 large cargo vessels surrounded by 2 sleek escort cruisers. Even at this range, the Vexstar ships looked dangerous with their black hulls and weapon-studded surfaces. Resilient Hope and Defiant Star are in position, the communications officer announced. Lieutenant Minho was one of Nari's surviving crew members, now serving as the human ship's comm specialist. The integration of Alliance and human personnel had been smoother than expected. Dong Hyen activated the tactical display. Red dots represented Vexstar ships. Blue dots showed the 3 human vessels approaching from different angles. Green lines indicated planned attack vectors and escape routes. Remember the plan, Dong Hyen said calmly. We are not trying to destroy all enemy ships. Our goal is to disable the escorts and capture 1 cargo vessel. Intelligence data is more valuable than destroyed metal. But Ram nodded from her position at the strategic planning console. She had adapted quickly to human procedures, though Nari could see she was still nervous about the unconventional approach they were taking. Vexstar escorts are moving to intercept formation, So Young reported. They have detected our approach and are preparing for combat. Nari watched the enemy ships change position on the tactical display. The 2 escort cruisers moved to place themselves between the human ships and the cargo vessels. It was exactly what Dong Hyen had predicted they would do. Phase 1 initiated, Dong Hyen announced. All ships begin approach pattern Alpha. The 3 human ships began to move in what looked like a chaotic dance. They changed direction constantly, never maintaining a straight course for more than a few seconds. Their speeds varied unpredictably. To outside observers, it would seem like they were confused or poorly coordinated. I do not understand, Kyung-soo said from his position at the damage control station. Why are we not moving directly toward the target? Taeho looked up from his engineering console with a grin. Because direct approaches are predictable. Vexstar Computers calculate interception courses based on straight-line movement. But if we never move in straight lines, their targeting systems cannot lock onto us. Nari began to see the cleverness in the human strategy. Alliance ships typically approached enemies in neat formations, maximizing firepower and defensive capabilities. But they also made themselves easy targets for enemy weapons. Human ships sacrifice some offensive power in exchange for being much harder to hit. Enemy ships are opening fire, So Young announced. Green plasma bolts streaked across space toward the human vessels. But the constantly changing flight patterns made accurate targeting nearly impossible. Most shots missed completely. The few that came close were absorbed by the ship's shields without causing significant damage. Now we enter Phase 2, Dong Haiyan said. All ships implement pattern beta. The 3 human ships suddenly changed their behavior. Instead of random movement, they began to coordinate their actions. When one ship dodged to the left, another would dodge to the right. When one ship accelerated, another would decelerate. They moved like parts of a single organism. How do they coordinate so precisely without constant communication? Boram asked in amazement. Practice, Zhiwu answered from her medical station. Human crews train together for hundreds of hours. We learn to anticipate each other's actions. We think like a pack instead of like individuals. Nari had never seen anything like it. The 3 ships wove between enemy plasma bolts like dancers performing an intricate ballet. They were still too far away to return fire effectively, but they were getting closer with each passing second. Vexstar escorts are becoming frustrated, So Young observed. They are increasing their rate of fire but decreasing their accuracy. This was another part of the human strategy that impressed Nari. They were not just avoiding enemy fire. They were manipulating enemy behavior. By forcing the Vexstar to waste ammunition on difficult targets, they were degrading the enemy's combat effectiveness. Phase 3, all ships, Dong Haiyan ordered. Implement divergent attack pattern. The 3 human vessels suddenly split apart, approaching the enemy formation from 3 different directions. The Vexstar escorts tried to cover all approaches, but found themselves caught between multiple threats. This is it, Dong Haiyan said quietly. Everything depends on the next 60 seconds. The indomitable spirit dove toward the nearest escort cruiser. Plasma cannons and missile launchers on both ships opened fire simultaneously. Space lit up with deadly energy as the 2 vessels engaged in close combat. Nari gripped the railing as the ship shook under enemy fire. But she noticed something remarkable about the human crew's response to combat. They did not panic or become rigid with fear. Instead, they seemed to become more focused and coordinated. Forward shields at 60%, Teho reported calmly. Targets. Rear armor is weakening, So Young added. Damage control teams report minor hull breaches on Deck 3. Kyung-soo announced. Each crew member provided information without being asked. Each person anticipated what others would need to know. Nari realized that this was what Dong Haiyan had meant about fighting like a pack. They trusted each other completely. The battle raged for several minutes. The human ships darted around the larger Vexstar vessels like insects harassing giants. They concentrated their fire on specific weak points, gradually wearing down enemy defenses. Resilient Hope reports successful hit on enemy engine systems, Minho announced. First escort. Cruiser is losing power. Defiant Star has disabled the second escort's weapon systems, he added moments later. Nari watched in amazement as the human strategy unfolded exactly as planned. The 2 escort cruisers caught between multiple attackers and unable to coordinate. Their defense were being systematically neutralized, but then something went wrong. New contacts on sensors, So Young said urgently. 3 additional Vexstar ships dropping out of hyperspace. Heavy cruiser configuration. Nari felt her blood turn to ice. The convoy had been more heavily defended than intelligence reports indicated. 3 heavy cruisers meant firepower equivalent to an entire Alliance battle group. It is a trap, Boram said quietly. They knew we were coming. The tactical situation had changed completely. Instead of facing 2 lightly armed escorts, They now confronted 5 Vexstar warships with overwhelming firepower advantage. Any Alliance commander would have ordered immediate retreat, but Dong Hyan did something unexpected. He smiled. "Well," he said cheerfully, "this makes things more interesting." Nari stared at him in disbelief. "Captain, we are outnumbered 5-3. Those heavy cruisers have enough firepower to destroy our entire task force." "Yes," Dong Hyan agreed. "But they also have something else." "What is that?" "Overconfidence. They think 3 small human ships will run away when faced with superior force. They expect us to behave like rational military officers." Nari began to understand. The Vexstar had set an ambush, but they had based their trap on conventional, tactical thinking. They expected their enemies to retreat when faced with impossible odds. "All ships," Dong Hyan announced over the communication system, "implement emergency protocol Omega. We are going to show our new friends what humans do when the odds get interesting." The 3 human ships suddenly changed formation again. Instead of trying to escape or defend themselves, they accelerated directly toward the newly arrived heavy cruisers. It was exactly the opposite of what any sane commander would do. "Captain," Nari said urgently, "this is suicide. We cannot fight 5 heavy cruisers with 3 light ships." Dong Hyan looked at her with that same confident grin she had seen on the observation deck. "Commander, you are thinking like an Alliance officer. You are calculating firepower ratios and armor thickness and weapon ranges. But you are forgetting the most important factor, which is what? We are not trying to win a conventional battle. We are trying to do something so unexpected, so impossible, so completely insane that the enemy will not know how to respond." Nari felt a chill run down her spine. She recognized the expression in Dong Hyan's eyes. It was the same look she had seen in her own mirror years ago, when she was young and believed that courage could overcome any obstacle. "What are your orders, Captain?" she asked. Dong Hyan turned to address his crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to attempt something that will either go down in military history as the greatest upset victory of all time, or as the most spectacular failure ever recorded." The crew responded with grins and determination. Not one person suggested retreat or surrender. "Oh." The indomitable spirit shook violently as Vexstar plasma cannons hammered against its shields. Nari gripped the railing beside Captain Dong Hyan's chair as the ship accelerated toward the massive enemy heavy cruiser. Through the viewscreen, she could see the Vexstar vessel growing larger with each passing second. Its black hull bristled with weapon ports that flashed continuously with deadly green fire. "Shields down to 30%, Tejo reported from his engineering station. His voice remained steady despite the chaos around them. "Hull breaches on decks 2 and 4. Emergency power to forward weapons. Target their bridge superstructure," So Young called out from tactical. "If we are going to ram them, we might as well make it count." Nari could not believe what she was hearing. These humans were discussing their own deaths as if they were planning a routine patrol mission. Their casual acceptance of sacrifice was both terrifying and inspiring. "Distance to target, 8,000 meters in closing," Minho announced. From communications, Resilient Hope and Defiant Star are engaging the other heavy cruisers. On the tactical display, Nari could see the other 2 human ships weaving between the larger Vexstar vessels. They were firing continuously, but their small weapons barely scratched the enemy's heavy armor. It looked like a hopeless fight. "Captain," Ram said urgently, "the other ships cannot survive much longer. Perhaps we should reconsider this course of action." Dong Hyan looked at her with that same confident smile. "Lieutenant, sometimes the most important victories come from actions that seem like failures. We are not just trying to destroy one ship. We are trying to change how this war is fought." Nari began to understand what he meant. This was not just about winning one battle. It was about proving that impossible odds could be overcome through determination and sacrifice. It was about showing the galaxy that the human way of war could succeed where traditional tactics had failed. 5,000 meters, So Young reported. Enemy ship is trying to turn away, but they are too large and slow. Impact in 40 seconds. The Vexstar heavy cruiser was desperately attempting to avoid the collision. Its massive engines flared as it tried to change course. The ship's that size could not maneuver quickly. The indomitable spirit was smaller and faster, closing the distance with deadly precision. All hands, brace for impact, Dong Hyan announced over the ship's communication system. It has been an honor serving with all of you. Nari felt tears in her eyes as she watched the human crew prepare for death. They were not afraid, they were not angry. They seemed almost peaceful, as if they had found exactly the ending they had always expected, but then something unexpected happened. Captain? Taeho called out suddenly. I am reading massive energy fluctuations in the enemy ship's power core. Their reactor is overloading. Dong Hyan straightened in his chair. Explain. The Vexstar heavy cruiser is trying to divert all power to engines for evasive maneuvers. But their reactor cannot handle the sudden increase in demand. They are experiencing cascade failures throughout their power grid. So Young studied her tactical readings with growing excitement. Sir, if their reactor goes critical, the explosion will destroy not just their ship but damage the other Vexstar vessels as well. Nari realized what was happening. The enemy's attempt to avoid the ramming attack was causing them to push their systems beyond safe limits. Their own desperate evasion was becoming their destruction. Distance 2,000 meters, Minho announced. 20 seconds to impact. Dong Hyan made a decision that surprised everyone on the bridge. Emergency reverse. Thrust, all stop, Captain? So Young asked in confusion. We do not need to ram them anymore, Dong Hyan explained. They are destroying themselves. Better to preserve our ship and use it to fight another day. The indomitable spirit's engines roared as they reversed direction, slowing the ship's approach to the enemy vessel. Through the view screen, Nari could see the Vexstar heavy cruiser's hull beginning to glow with internal fires. Explosions flickered along its length like deadly fireworks. Their reactor core is breaching, Taeho reported. Critical explosion in 10 seconds. All ships, retreat to safe distance, Dong Hyan commanded. Prepare for a massive energy release. The 3 human vessels accelerated away from the doomed Vexstar ship just as its reactor finally exploded. The heavy cruiser vanished in a ball of white-hot plasma that expanded outward like a miniature star. The shockwave that followed shattered the hulls of the 2 nearest enemy ships and sent the others tumbling through space. Nari stared in amazement at the tactical display. Where moments before there had been 5 Vexstar warships, now only 2 remained operational. The others were either destroyed or too damaged to continue fighting. A single human ship's threat to ram had caused the enemy to destroy themselves. Status report, Dong Hyan requested calmly. Resilient Hope reports moderate damage but remains combat effective, Minho announced. Defiant Star has lost engines but weapons are still online. Enemy vessels are withdrawing, So Young added. The remaining 2 ships are retreating toward the hyperspace jump point. Nari could hardly believe what she had witnessed. 3 small human ships had defeated a superior Vexstar force not through overwhelming firepower, but through tactics. So unexpected that the enemy had been unable to respond effectively. The cargo ships, Ram said suddenly. What about the original convoy? So Young checked her sensors. Still there. 3 Vexstar cargo vessels abandoned by their escorts. No significant defenses remaining. Dong Hyan looked at Nari with a questioning expression. Your call, Commander. Do we capture them or let them go? Nari thought for a moment. The original mission had been to test human tactics against Vexstar forces. That objective had been accomplished beyond their wildest expectations. But the war was still raging, and those cargo ships contained resources that could be used against Alliance worlds. We capture them, she decided. But we do it carefully. No unnecessary risks after what we have already accomplished. The next hour was spent securing the Vexstar cargo vessels. The enemy crews had abandoned their ships when the escorts fled, leaving behind valuable intelligence data and strategic materials. It was a treasure trove of information that Alliance intelligence had been trying to obtain for months. As they prepared to return to Space Station Omega-7, Nari found herself standing beside Dong Hyen on the bridge. The immediate danger had passed, but she knew their real challenges were just beginning. "The High Council will demand explanations," she said quietly. "We disobeyed direct orders and engaged the enemy without authorization." Dong Hyen nodded. "Yes, they will be angry. But they will also be curious. We accomplished something that traditional Alliance tactics could not achieve." 3 cargo ships and intelligence data? "No," Dong Hyen replied. "We proved that cooperation between species makes us stronger. Your tactical experience combined with our unconventional methods created something new. Something the Vexstar were not prepared for." Nari looked around the bridge at the mixed crew of humans and Alliance personnel. They had worked together seamlessly during the battle. Language barriers and cultural differences had been forgotten in the heat of combat. They had become a single unit focused on a common goal. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go back and face the consequences of our actions. Some people will call us heroes. Others will call us criminals, but we will know the truth." "Which is?" Dong Hyen smiled, that same confident grin that had convinced her to join this mission. "That the war just changed. The Vexstar think they understand how Alliance forces fight. But they have never faced humans working alongside other species. They have never encountered the kind of tactics we use today." Nari realized he was right. This single engagement had demonstrated that human methods could succeed where traditional approaches had failed. More importantly, it had shown that different species could fight together effectively when they trusted each other completely. "The High Council will want to know how we did it," she said. "Then we will tell them. We will explain every detail of our strategy and tactics. We will offer to train other crews in these methods. We will show them that cooperation is more powerful than competition." As the 3 human ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying their prisoners and captured intelligence back to Alliance space, Nari felt something she had not experienced in months. She felt optimistic about the future. The war against the Vexstar was far from over. There would be more battles, more losses, more difficult decisions ahead. But now they had something they had lacked before. Proof that victory was possible. When Dong Hyen had found her on the observation deck, ready to give up hope, he had reminded her to lift her head and keep fighting. Now she understood that those words were more than just encouragement. They were a philosophy of life. No matter how dark things seemed, no matter how impossible the odds appeared, there was always a reason to keep trying. Because sometimes the most important victories came from the moments when surrender seemed like the only option. The journey home would take 12 hours. Nari spent that time learning from the human crew, studying their methods, and planning how to present their accomplishments to the High Council, but mostly she spent it remembering how to hope. The courtroom on Space Station Omega-7 was packed with officers from every species in the Alliance. Nari sat at the defendant's table beside Captain Dong Hyen and his crew. Behind them, the families and friends of those who had participated in the unauthorized mission filled the gallery. The air was thick with tension and uncertainty. Admiral Quan Ho of the Altarian fleet served as the senior judge. His blue skin was marked with the ritual scars of his warrior culture, and his expression showed no mercy. Beside him sat Admiral Yon Seo of the Alliance Strategic Command and General Sung-min of the Draknari Forces. All 3 looked ready to end military careers with a single verdict. "Commander Nari," Admiral Quan Ho began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "you stand accused of disobeying direct orders, engaging the enemy without authorization, and endangering Alliance personnel through reckless conduct. How do you plead?" Nari stood slowly, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. 3 weeks had passed since their return from the Kepler system. 3 weeks of investigations, interrogations, and media attention. The entire galaxy was watching to see how the Alliance would handle this unprecedented situation. "Guilty, sir," she said clearly. I accept full responsibility for my actions and the actions of all personnel under my command. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Many had expected her to argue that circumstances justified her decisions. Instead, she had chosen to face the consequences directly. Admiral Yun Seo leaned forward. Captain Dong Hyan, you also stand accused of the same charges. Additionally, you are charged with corrupting Alliance personnel and promoting insubordination among mixed crews. How do you plead? Dong Hyan rose with that same confident smile that had convinced Nari to join his mission. Guilty as charged. Admiral, though I would like to point out that corruption implies we made people worse. I believe we made them better. Several spectators laughed before court security restored order. Admiral Kwanho looked annoyed by the interruption. This is not a comedy performance, Captain. This court deals with matters of military discipline and alliance security. Your actions, while potentially successful in tactical terms, represent a complete breakdown of command authority. Nari had expected this reaction. Military organizations valued order and predictability above all else. What she and Dong Hyan had done challenged the entire structure of Alliance command hierarchy. Before we proceed to sentencing, Admiral, Sung Min said, this court will hear testimony regarding the tactical and strategic results of the defendant's actions. Colonel De Jong of Alliance Intelligence took the witness stand. He was a small, precise man who rarely showed emotion. But today his voice carried a note of excitement that was impossible to miss. Esteemed judges, he began, the intelligence gathered during the Kepler operation has provided us with the most complete picture of Vexstar capabilities and intentions that we have obtained in 2 years of warfare. He activated a holographic display showing captured Vexstar documents and technical specifications. The cargo ships contained detailed plans for their next offensive phase. We now know the location of their main supply bases, the composition of their reserve fleets, and their intended targets for the coming year. Admiral Yon Seo studied the information with obvious interest. What is your assessment of this intelligence? Value? Invaluable, ma'am. This information has already allowed us to intercept 3 Vexstar supply convoys and prevent 2 surprise attacks on Alliance colonies. The tactical advantage we have gained may have shortened the war by months or even years. Nari felt a small spark of hope. The court was required to consider both the violation of regulations and the positive results of their actions. The next witness was Admiral Chen Wei of the Alliance Fleet Academy. She was known throughout the military for her expertise in tactical doctrine and strategic planning. Admiral Chen Wei, Admiral Kwanho said, you have reviewed the tactical methods employed during the Kepler engagement. What is your professional assessment? The elderly admiral stood slowly, her expression thoughtful. Esteemed judges, what I witnessed in the battle recordings represents a fundamental evolution in space combat tactics. The coordination between human and Alliance crews exceeded anything I have seen in 40 years of military service. She gestured toward the defendants. Traditional Alliance doctrine emphasizes individual species fighting according to their natural strengths. But these crews demonstrated something entirely new. They combined different species' abilities into a single, more effective fighting force. Are you suggesting we should ignore military regulations whenever someone has a creative idea? Admiral, Sung Min asked sharply. No, sir. I am suggesting that we have discovered something so significant that it requires us to reconsider our entire approach to warfare. The enemy has adapted to our traditional tactics. We must adapt as well, or we will lose this war. The testimony continued for hours. Technical experts explained how human tactics had exploited previously unknown Vexstar weaknesses. Medical officers described how mixed crews showed improved performance under stress. Even captured Vexstar prisoners admitted that the human approach had caught them completely unprepared. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Ram took the witness stand with obvious nervousness. As the youngest officer involved in the mission, she had the most to lose from this trial. Her entire career hung in the balance. Lieutenant, Admiral Kwanho said gently, You were serving under Commander Nari when she chose to join Captain Donghayan's unauthorized mission. Did you feel pressured to participate? Bo-Ram straightened her shoulders. No, sir. Commander Nari gave all of us the opportunity to withdraw from the mission with no consequences. I chose to participate. Why? The young officer was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was clear and determined. Because I believed it was the right thing to do, sir. We had been losing the war using traditional methods. Captain Donghayan offered us a chance to try something different. Something that might actually work. And was the risk worth it? Sir, 3 weeks ago I thought we were going to lose this war. I thought the Vexstar were too strong and we were too divided to stop them. But working with the human crew showed me something I had never seen before, which was that we are stronger together than we are apart. Human creativity combined with alliance experience created tactics that neither group could have developed alone. We did not just win a battle. Sir, we proved that cooperation between species is possible. Admiral Ionesio leaned forward with interest. Lieutenant, if you were given the choice again, knowing what you know now about the consequences, would you make the same decision? Bo-Ram did not hesitate. Yes, ma'am. Because some things are more important than regulations. Some things are worth risking your career for. When the testimony phase ended, the 3 admirals retired to deliberate. Nari and her companions waited in tense silence as their fate was decided. The courtroom remained packed, with journalists and military officers from across the galaxy waiting to see how the Alliance would handle this unprecedented situation. After 2 hours, the judges returned. Admiral Quan Ho stood to deliver the verdict. This court finds all defendants guilty of the charges against them. However, we also find that extraordinary circumstances existed which, while not excusing their actions, do provide significant mitigation. Nari felt her heart racing. The guilty verdict meant court-martial and likely imprisonment. But the mention of mitigation suggested the punishment might be less severe than expected. Commander Nari, the admiral continued, you are hereby reduced in rank to lieutenant commander and sentenced to 6 months of disciplinary duty. However, this sentence is suspended pending your agreement to serve as liaison officer for a new experimental program. Nari blinked in surprise. What program, sir? Admiral Ionesio answered. The Alliance High Council has voted to establish mixed species tactical units based on the methods you and Captain Donghayan developed. You will serve as the program's military director. The courtroom erupted in surprised conversation. Nari could hardly believe what she was hearing. Instead of being punished for breaking regulations, she was being asked to institutionalize the very tactics that had gotten her in trouble. Captain Donghayan, Admiral Seungmin said, you are sentenced to formal reprimand and 6 months restricted duty. You will serve as the program's tactical advisor, teaching other crews the methods your people have developed. Donghayan grinned widely. It would be my honor, sir. The remaining crew members received similar suspended sentences in exchange for participating in the new program. Within minutes, what had seemed like a criminal trial had become a recruitment meeting. As the court session ended and people began to file out, Nari found herself standing beside Donghayan in the hallway outside the courtroom. How did you know? She asked. How did you know they would react this way? Donghayan shrugged. I did not know for certain. But I hoped that military leaders would be smart enough to recognize results when they saw them. Sometimes you have to break a few rules to save the whole system.